trickle-down economics, as opposed to what we support, which is middle-class economics. Better jobs, bigger paychecks, better future. And when the middle class has consumer confidence, they consume, injecting demand into the economy, creating jobs. Revenue neutral is a very important standard for us to have. Growth is very, I tell anybody who goes to any meeting for us, put growth in the middle of the table. Growth is what is important. Growth of good paying jobs, growth in our economy. And that growth means that we do so in a way that creates jobs and reduces the deficit. What the Republicans have been proposing would increase the debt by $3 trillion at a minimum. We cannot go down that path. So they want to say, oh, the growth is going to pay the tab. It never has. It's only created more debt. They're trickled down. Now, let's make a judgment when we see what they have. But so far, it's not about tax reform. What we want to do is engage them in a bipartisan way in simplification, fairness, closing special interest loopholes, and having proper revenue to meet the needs of the American people and create growth in our economy, because growth does not just come from tax cuts for the wealthy. That's what they think. It hasn't. Growth comes from the education of the American people, investments in research and development. We will have our agenda on this as part of the better deal. But yes, to your question, revenue neutral is very important to us. So again, whether it's what we have coming up or certain deadlines, which was part of our discussion last night, that we have certain deadlines coming up September 30th. Many things expire. We'll have to extend them by the 30th or shortly thereafter. You see a lot of activity on health care. Senator Sanders has introduced his in the House. Our Democrats have introduced Medicare for everyone over 50 to 64. All of these are on the table to be considered. Universal care, that is our goal. Let's see what the numbers are and how we can come together about it. But I don't want anybody.
All right, we've been listening to the House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, speaking at her weekly press conference. But right now, you are also looking at some live pictures from Fort Myers, Florida, where President Trump is meeting with first responders who have been critical, essential, and on the ground from the very beginning in the relief efforts after Hurricane Irma. My monitor right now, I'm leaning in just to see if I see it right there on the right. You can see President Trump shaking hands with folks on the ground. On the ground there, Alex Marquardt, he's in Fort Myers. That's where the president landed. He's going to be he's joining me right now. So, Alex, the president landed. He made news on the political front. But at this moment, Alex, since we're watching these live pictures, let's stick to the relief effort. The president, the first lady, the vice president, all there to speak. And they're going to be getting a briefing very soon. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, this is the third visit that he's made to a hurricane-ravaged area in just the past 3 weeks. We've had these back-to-back historic hurricanes. President touching down just moments ago here at Fort Myers. He is being accompanied by the First Lady, Melania Trump. He stepped off the plane and gave that press conference, but he was greeted by Vice President.
The Marines, everybody, the Navy, the job that everybody has done is incredible. And I know you're also in the process, but to think of the incredible power of that storm, and while people unfortunately passed, it was such a small number that nobody would have. People thought thousands and thousands of people may have their lives ended, and the number is a very small number, which is a great tribute to you. Also, in the fact that I know in the case of FEMA, in the case of Coast Guard, the job you've done in saving people and saving lives. As an example, in Harvey, in Texas, we talked over 16,000 lives. And nobody would even understand that. It's hard to even imagine. And down here, the same thing. So I want to thank everybody. You guys, I don't want to see you next week in another place, okay? We've seen you enough. But I just want to thank everybody, the first responders. On behalf of myself, our Vice President, Melania really wanted to be with us. It's really touched her heart what's going on. And we've seen the devastation. We're going to see some more of it now, unfortunately. And I have to say that your governor, where is our governor here? Rick Scott. The job he's done is incredible. And I guess I've been very lucky because, you know, you have a great governor in Texas, you have a great governor in Florida. The job that Rick has done is being talked about all over. And to think that, and I must say, Florida, power and light, where's Eric? Over there. Eric, where's Eric? Come here, Eric. Great job. Get going, Eric. I will say they're way ahead of schedule. There are more electrical people in this state, I think, than ever accumulated anywhere in the world, is what I read before. It's from all over the country they came. And, I mean, you've never seen anything like it. Mobilized all over. I see Pam Bondi, who's done such an incredible job stopping certain little problems before they start and actually getting some of the companies to put up a lot of money now. So the Attorney General, I want to thank you, Pam. Fantastic job. Really good job. And Elaine, where's Elaine Duke? Elaine Duke. And where's our Brock? Right here. Don't lose them, okay, Elaine Duke? I have to say that Brock, working with your governor, working with Pam, working with Elaine, working, by the way, with Marco Rubio, who's around here someplace. It's a team like very few people have seen, and I want to thank everybody. Marco, I want to thank you a lot. You were really helpful. And I have to say that, what do I know? But I hope this man right here, Rick Scott, runs for the Senate. I don't know what he's going to do, but I know that at a certain point it ends for you, and we can't let it end. So I hope he runs for Senate. Who knows what he's going to do? Again, I came down to say hello to you folks and to say hello to you folks and the First Lady and myself. This is an honor for us to be here. We're now going to tour some of the areas. And as Rick said, we have been very, very fast, and we had to be. We were signing papers as the storm was coming in, and that's never happened before. But Rick, thank you very much for the great job. And Brock and everybody, thank you very much. We have the great Rick Perry here. Rick. We have energy. We have Linda McMahon. We have so many of the people, so many of the cabinet members, because they're going to help. I want to thank Mike Pence. He is, in fact, I'd like you to say.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mr. President, First Lady. It's an honor to be with you today, just to pay a debt of gratitude for the great leadership here at the state and local level. I know the President directed the full resources of the federal government to support Florida's effort to prepare for and confront and now recover and rebuild from Hurricane Irma. The President's directive over this weekend was very clear. Wherever Hurricane Irma goes, we're going to be there first. And thanks for the great leadership of your governor and your emergency management team and all of the great first responders on the ground. That's exactly what Florida did. And as the President has said, we're with you today. We're going to be with you tomorrow. And we're going to be with you until Florida rebuilds bigger and better than ever before.
Just one word on a very important subject. So your power is, I mean, literally, Rick, it's going on as we speak. It's going way ahead of schedule, weeks ahead of schedule. And most of it, I guess, outside of the Keys, where we have a very special problem, but we're working hard on that. That's a very, very special problem. That was just dead center. And but we're working very hard on that. And we've got a lot of goods out there, a lot of water, a lot of food, a lot of everything. But I'd like to ask your governor to say a few words. Again, he's been absolutely outstanding. Thank you, Rick.
Well, first off, I want to thank everybody for their prayers. We've had prayers from all over the world. I want to thank everybody for doing everything they can to get us back. I want to thank the President and the Vice President. What I can tell you is they were always accessible. They made quick decisions. They surrounded themselves with outstanding people. They were constantly calling me to say, what resources do we need? I want to thank basically the entire military. I want to thank the Coast Guard, the Navy. I want to say thank Secretary Duke. I want to thank Brock, Administrator Long. They were always calling to say, what resources can we bring to the table? As you know, our state's been devastated. I've been in the Keys. If you go to the Keys, there were 9-foot storm surges. Their homes just toppled. We don't want to lose a life. Down here in this part of the state, we got a lot of flooding, a lot of wind, a lot of rain. We've got flooding up in the Northeast. We are working hard to get our power back on. Our utilities have restored over 4 million homes already. We're down to about 25% of our homes, and every person in our state wants their power back. We all want our power back. But I want to thank them for what they're doing so far. We have high expectations. We want our power back as fast as possible. I want to thank the federal government for all their support, getting our ports reopened so we get our fuel back in our state. We're short of fuel. We've got lines in our gas stations. We're still at lines in our gas stations. But the federal government has been a partner to help us make sure our ports get open so we get the fuel back in the state. We've done law enforcement escorts of our tanker trucks to get back to the gas stations, make sure we have fuel. So everybody has worked hard. I want to thank our National Guard. We've called up over 8,000 National Guard members. We've got National Guard members from other states down here, making sure our shelters were open, people were comfortable. We opened almost 600 shelters in record time. And it wouldn't have happened but for the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, the National Guard, but also National Guard from other states. So we have a lot of work to do. We're not done today. We're going to work hard. I know the federal government will continue to be a partner. Our locals will. Our state will. We're going to make sure we're continue to be a strong, resilient state. But I want to thank from the bottom of my heart everybody's prayers to help us get through this.
Great, thank you. So we are now going to be making a tour of the areas. We're going to see some of the folks and make sure they're happy, because we're trying to keep them as happy as we can under the circumstances. In many cases, they lost their homes, and it's a tough situation. So we're going to go see a lot of the folks. And I will tell you, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank the military. Just incredible. So thank everybody, and we'll see you later. Media, we appreciate your being so understanding. It's been a very tough period of time, even for you folks, and we really do appreciate your understanding. This has been a difficult situation. As Rick knows, almost all of the roads are now open, and the ports are just about open. What we had to do to get some of those ports open, people wouldn't even believe that we did it so quickly. So we're very proud of the job that everybody around has done. Thank you all. Thank you very much. We'll see you later. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, you're listening right there. President Trump, Vice President Pence, the First Lady, and many others, including the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, speaking there. The president getting a briefing. He's going to be taking a tour of some of the areas around Fort Myers before he then heads to Naples. But taking a moment right there to thank first responders, all the members of the military, the Coast Guard, the Navy, who've been working around the clock to try to clear debris, to search and rescue in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. And an important update from Governor Rick Scott right there, that they've restored over 4 million homes, power to over 4 million homes to date. That's not done. There are still millions of people without power, but that is the progress. All right, let me bring in where we left off Alex Marquardt. He's in Fort Myers, right where the president is landed and was just speaking. And Alex, as you well noted, this is the third time in 3 weeks that the president has gone to see a natural disaster.
Yeah, and you heard him in his comments there right at the beginning, joking with that crowd that he doesn't want to see them again next week. This has just been an incredible period with these back-to-back hurricanes, the president making 3 trips. This is his first one down here to Florida. Of course, the major concern whenever a White House visits an area of devastation is not tying up too many emergency resources, local resources. But he wants to be sure to actually go to where people have been affected and to see that devastation. So he's starting here in Fort Myers. This is the biggest airport in the area, arriving not too long ago. As you mentioned, he was there with the vice president, with the governor of Florida. He's due to get a briefing here, lasts around 30 minutes. But the White House has been very conscientious to make sure that everyone knows that he has been monitoring the situation day in, day out, posting photos of him getting his briefings in the Oval Office and speaking with local officials. We've been speaking with with mayors in different towns, and they've been very happy with the response from the White House. They say that things have been going smoothly. They've been getting the resources and the information they need. Now, in a short time after that briefing, the president and his entourage will get in Marine One and head a short distance down to Naples. Naples was one of the hardest hit areas here on the West Coast. We're getting a little bit more information about what he'll actually be doing. We're told that he will be visiting a trailer park. Now, remember, so many of these homes were spared. A lot of people who boarded up their homes and left and went to shelters came home and found their homes intact. So there was a huge sigh of relief. But there were Category 1 winds, and that wreaked devastation in numerous trailer parks all across the state, flooding them, making it very difficult for the residents to get out. So the president will be visiting Naples, visiting that trailer park. We're told he will meet with first responders and with victims down there. This, of course, comes after his visit to Houston, where he came under a lot of criticism for not visiting with victims and with first responders. So they will be sure to do that today. The big question that we've been getting, that the president is going to face right now, is when will the power come back on? As you heard him say, they have been making a lot of progress, but around 25% of this state is still without power. Kate?
Yeah, they seem to be very aware of that concern and frustration. As the governor, that was one of the first things that he wanted to speak to when the president gave him a moment to speak. All right, Alex, thank you so much. Let me bring in White House correspondent Jim Acosta, of course, traveling with the president. So, Jim, this is the third time in 3 weeks that the president's going to a disaster area. As Alex noted, his first trip to Texas came under quite a bit of criticism. It seems that this president has seen a lot and learned a lot in 3 weeks.
That's right, Kate. And as Alex was saying, he's going to be taking an aerial tour of Southwest Florida, looking at some of the devastation. He's also going to visit a mobile home community in Naples. And you can see some of the damage behind me. There is a piece of one of the mobile homes in a community that we're stationed near that was ripped off and thrown behind me, and that's sitting behind me along with all the downed trees. So that's just one snapshot of the devastation that you see down here. And Alex is right. What the president was saying, Governor Scott we're saying is absolutely right. Getting the power back on is a major concern down here. As we were driving in, most of the stoplights are not working. Shopping centers are not really up and running. We went to one supermarket that was basically the only sign of life in this community, and the people in there did not have cold drinks to buy. So, you know, the lady at the checkout counter said that she wished she could have a cold drink, that she hadn't had a cold drink in days. So that just gives you a sense as to what people are going through down in this part of the country. Now, we should point out the president did make some remarks. Yes, he has learned from some of the stumbles that occurred in Texas during his trip down to Corpus Christi to see the damage down there when he talked about having a big crowd. We should point
in terms of the areas hit by Hurricane Irma, the images coming out of the lower Keys especially are really devastating. And many people are still not able to get into their homes to really even survey what's left, what damage there is. Making all of it worse, the big issue we've been talking about already, power still out for millions. The Keys are also still under curfew, and homeowners in the lower Keys are still not allowed back to their homes to check on their homes. Joining me on the phone right now is Monroe County Commissioner Heather Carruthers. Monroe County, of course, covers the Keys. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining me again.
Sure, happy to do it.
Thank you. We spoke yesterday. I just want to get an update. Progress made or frustrations? Where do things stand? What's the important message today?
Sure. The important message today is what it was yesterday. Please try to be patient. We are making progress. We've got about 16% of power restored from in the very end of the Keys, the Key Haven through Key West. We've got about 42% of power restored in the upper Keys. We have water pressure all the way down to Marathon, but we are still under a boil water order. So in terms of our health concerns, if folks don't have power to boil water or don't have fuel to boil water, we're really concerned about health, which is part of why we're not inviting everyone back yet. That compounded with the fact that we have a lot of essential services folks trying to get through to help continue with the recovery, as well as supplies to everybody. So if everyone could just be a little bit more patient. I have one other note that everybody needs to understand that the port of Key West is closed and the waters surrounding Key West are considered a safety zone. So Please do not try to take your boat anywhere near Key West or the Keys. You will be boarded by the Coast Guard.
Important messages, very important messages. We did hear, and I'm not sure if you were able to hear it, Commissioner, but the President Trump just spoke a moment ago, and part of his remarks, he mentioned the Keys, and he said in particular that, talking about getting the power back quickly, but said outside of the Keys where we have a very special problem down there, but we are working very hard on that. It made me just wonder, the president's on the ground, he's going to tour Fort Myers and Naples today. Do you wish he was coming to Monroe County?
Frankly, yes and no. We're just trying to recover. Every single moment is absorbed with getting supplies where they need to be, making sure that the right people are getting access back into the Keys, repaving highways, dealing with our 300 downed power lines. So we really appreciate the federal support that we've received, but we're really trying to just work down here.
Yeah. The focus being exactly on just getting one power line up at a time and getting clean water to everyone down in the Keys. As the days tick on and the temperatures continue to rise, I know for so many, anguish is kind of turning into frustration. But the message from Heather Carruthers is patience, please. They're working. They're working on all of it. Commissioner, thank you so much for getting on again. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Happy to do it.
Thank you. So we're going to have much more on the president's trip to Florida. That is ahead. And plus this, as Jim Acosta was noting, deal or no deal, do you all have whiplash? I kind of do, and it doesn't feel so nice. When finding a solution for 800,000 dreamers living in the United States, DACA recipients. We've heard from the president and top leaders in Congress this morning. I'm not really sure where they stand, so we're going to try to sift it out for you in just a moment. This morning, President Trump seems to be moving closer to another deal with Democrats, this time on protections for the some 800,000 dreamers in the country, the undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as children by their parents illegally. The president, you recall, of course, rescinded the program announced by Jeff Sessions, and now there is something of a 6-month buffer for Congress to figure out a solution. So what are they figuring out? Well, Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi had dinner with the president last night, and then it's pretty much anyone's guess at this point. There's a deal, there's no deal. Funding the wall is off the table. No, funding the wall is on the table. Here is how the president explained it just moments ago when he arrived in Florida.
We are looking for extreme border security and surveillance, everything else. We also have to get the wall. It doesn't have to be here, but they can't obstruct the wall, whether it's in a budget or something else, when we're ready.
Are you open to citizenship for dreamers over time?
No, we're not looking at citizenship. We're not looking at amnesty. We're looking at allowing people to stay here. We're working with everybody, Republican. We're working with Democrat. I just spoke with Paul Ryan. He's on board. Everybody's on board.
CNN congressional correspondent Phil Mattingly is here. Phil, what is going on? Please make sense of this. I feel like I cover Congress for a long time, but I also feel like I have no idea right now.
Yeah, you're kind of in the same boat as a lot of people here. Look, I think what's important here is the nuance here is what's going to actually make the deal happen. If you want to track back into what happened last night, there was a dinner, and the agreement was on kind of the parameters of where a final deal would end. Essentially, they would protect DACA participants in exchange for significant package of border security, whether it's money, resources, something like that. The details of what each of those two things actually will be are extraordinarily important, and you're finding out why this morning. Take a listen to what Democratic Minority Leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, told us she believes the deal contains just a short while ago.
Last night, Leader Schumer and I had a very productive meeting with President Trump, where we agreed to a plan to work out an agreement to protect our nation's dreamers from deportation. We insisted that the Bipartisan DREAM Act, the one introduced by Congresswoman Allard, would be the basis for the protection, and that we would review border security measures that do not include building a wall.
Now, Kate, let me kind of explain where the real confusion comes in right now. Leader Pelosi making very clear the DREAM Act for them is the baseline. The DREAM Act includes a lengthy but very real pathway to citizenship over a lengthy period of time. You played the sound from the president on the tarmac a short while ago. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, said on the Senate floor that the baseline was enshrining DACA protections into law. The DREAM Act and what DACA does are two very different things, both on the pathway to citizenship and the scope of the programs altogether. So here's why I think the nuance and the details here are extremely important, because how this is all going to end up is still very much up in the air. While the parameters are clearly agreed upon, and I would note, Kate, reporting in the past couple of days, it's been very clear this was going to be the deal. Republican leaders were in the kind of the preliminary talks, but it was going to be border security for DACA protections. But the details of that, the specifics of that are both extremely important for everybody involved, but also for the Republican leaders who, by the way, weren't in the meeting and are going to need to sell this to some of their members, at least in the House, at least a majority of the conference, to ever be able to get it on the floor. So positive first steps forward. No shortage of confusion right now. And I think what the deal is actually going to look like is still very much up in the air, Kate. Yeah,
I mean, first and foremost, who is negotiating with who? And I know there's a whom in there, but I never get it right. Phil, stick around, though. Let's continue the discussion, because Phil does a great job of trying to unconfuse me, but he confused me. So joining Phil and I, CNN politics editor-at-large Chris Cillizza, CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston, and CNN political analyst and senior writer at The Atlantic, Molly Ball. Molly, here's one thing that is confounding me as Phil's laying it out very perfectly of what exactly is being said and not said. Why is any of this being said publicly until the principals actually know what they're negotiating about?
Well, I think the Democrats' strategy has been that they've got to hold Trump to his word when they feel that he's promised them something. Trump has a long history of saying things that he thinks people want to hear in a private meeting and then saying something else in public. So I think the Democrats wanted to come out first and say this is what we agreed to. And they have, in fact. There are a lot of details to work out. The president is not a particularly detail-oriented person, but the broad strokes of the deal that he confirmed on Twitter this morning, saying, defending the Dreamers, saying they need to be allowed to stay in the country, that's a big deal. That is a pretty firm statement of where the administration wants this to head. And, I think what Trump learned from the last deal he struck with the Democrats is that Republicans may cry and squeal about stuff like this, but they're going to rubber stamp what he wants to do, because what their constituents want is for them to back up the president.
Yeah, and Mark, there was a question of the president said early this morning that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell were on board. It was unclear if those conversations had actually occurred, but the president in Florida says that he just spoke to Ryan, I assume just on the flight, and he's on board.
Yeah, in many ways, this is a very significant step. It's going to be very messy, as Phil said, and it will be interesting to see how it all ends up when the dust settles on this. But the fact is that President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party. And what we've seen in the 8 months since he's been in office is that congressional Republicans have ceded all authority to him, meaning he is the one who's setting the table. He is the one who's dictating the terms of the debate. So when he comes out and says that he's working with the Democrats on getting something done like this, in many ways, Republicans, the Mitch McConnells, the Paul Ryans of the world, have to go along with the president. Now, in the end, will this all be scuttled because Democrats are adamant about not funding the wall? Perhaps. But right now, we have seen a little bit progress move forward, certainly on an issue that is really at the forefront of Congress right now, because they do need to address it. 6 months is not a very long time.
It sure isn't, especially when you're talking about getting anything done in Congress. Chris, immigration hawks are not happy about this. Folks who backed the president and it said one thing that they knew where he stood was on immigration and building the wall. Well, maybe not so much anymore. I mean, Steve King is one of them, of course. He says that there could be a real cost to the president if he goes through with this, no wall included. He spoke to New Day this morning. Listen.
Something's going to have to be reversed here with this president's policy, or it'll just blow up his base. I mean, this was a straight-up promise all the way through his campaign. What it means is that the base will leave him. They won't be able to defend him anymore.
Chris, do you think that is the case? Because as the president has gone back on campaign promises or evolved on campaign promises, we have not seen that to date.
Yeah, remember it was one of the billion controversies Donald Trump caused in the 2016 campaign was when he said at a rally, I could go out in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and my base would still be with me. And we all thought, oh my gosh, holy cow. But it sort of proved out that way, Kate. There was nothing really that he said or did up to and including, and we've revisited it over the last...
This is the equivalent of going out on Fifth Avenue and shooting...
No, not at all. But my point is that seems like an exaggeration, but given his base's loyalty to him, particularly through the Access Hollywood tapes that we've heard more about because Hillary Clinton is hawking her book of late, I'm not convinced Steve King is right. Do I think that there is a chunk of people who, Steve King among them, Ann Coulter among them, Breitbart, who will turn against Trump for a period of time? If he goes through with this, which to me with him, it's a day-by-day presidency, so I don't know if he will. But if he goes through with it, yeah, I think they will. But I do think there's a large group of people that like Trump's personality, his tone, his willingness to shake things up, even if that means working with Democrats. I just think those people have never left him since he announced in June 2015. I don't think his base, as Steve King puts it, is going to walk away now.
One big question is, are there consequences amongst his party on Capitol Hill who have control of Congress? I mean, Phil, do you see a scenario where Paul Ryan would bring forward any kind of measure on DACA or whatever we're going to call it whenever it happens that wouldn't get a majority of Republican support? If it was so much of a Democratic deal, would he really bring it forward?
Yeah, I spoke to one Republican member kind of just on background a short while ago this morning, and he said explicitly no chance, right? That Paul Ryan, the speaker, has made very clear that he's working with his conference on this. And I think, look, Kate, if you take a step back, this is why what happened last night is problematic for leaders on one level. As I noted, there was always going to be a deal. Leaders were very much in favor of working towards a solution on DACA. The speaker's made very clear that he never wanted to see all of these individuals deported. He never wanted to see these protections taken away. But there's a process that they were going through. It was a slow process. There's going to be a methodical process where they got their conference comfortable with the protections or kind of the deal that was going to be in place, with a heavy emphasis on how much border security they could get in a package. Again, whether it was money or resources. What last night kind of did was undercut that. And now the focus is on the scope of the DACA protections or whether the DREAM Act is the baseline. Again, the speaker is very aware of where his conference is on this. He's very aware of the complications, particularly on the far right of the conference. And so he's not going to do anything, at least I'd be very surprised, and I think in talking to members this morning, they would also be very surprised, that would fly in the face of where they are. This was always going to be a complicated and complex issue that some members of their conference were not going to be happy with at all, the Steve Kings, as you note. I think the big question now is how does the speaker kind of mold what the president and what Democrats think the president agreed to last night into a deal that gets his conference to a place where a majority will support. And Kate, he's going to speak in about 30 minutes, and I think that's the big question right now.
I mean, and good luck, Speaker Ryan. I mean, Molly, earlier today, I mean, this all happened. If you are confused, everyone, it's okay, because different statements have come out just in the last 3 hours. It was the wall will come later is explicitly what the president said when he was leaving the White House to go to Florida. He lands in Florida, Molly. I don't know what transpired on the plane. And then he says, the wall is vital to me. There has to be an understanding that the wall will be funded, or if basically nothing, then will be the opposition and obstructionists. I guess is there some way both of those things can be true?
Well, I guess one way to resolve it might be that the wall isn't part of this deal, but the president still intends to push for it and still intends to push Congress on it.
Down the road.
Down the road.
Right,
and that seemed to be what he was saying. That's also what the Democrats said, right? They said coming out of the meeting last night, they said, we agreed to disagree on the wall, and this deal is going to be separate from that. I do think we should point out in this discussion, protecting the Dreamers is a hugely popular thing to do. Majority of Republican voters support it. Majority of Trump voters support it in poll after poll. We're not talking about the whole issue of immigration, which of course is much more of a flashpoint and much more contentious.
Right, but that never
if you're
stops
just
Congress
talking
from
about
mucking it
protecting
up.
the dreamers, this is something that Paul Ryan is in favor of. This is something the business community is in favor of. This is something that is broadly popular. And so, you know, yes, Breitbart is freaking out. Ann Coulter's freaking out. Laura Ingram's freaking out. But in terms of the actual where the American public is on this issue, it's very clearly in favor of something like DACA. So, you know, you can, if you had put comprehensive immigration reform, much less the DREAM Act, on the floor in 2013 or 2014, it would have passed because you would have had most of the Democrats and most of the Republicans. You are going to have people on the far left and the far right of both conferences opposed to some of the details. But this is something that most people want to do.
Listening to your constituents and the American people, an amazingly novel idea in 2017. Mark, you get first and last next time. Great to see you guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, friends and family now speaking out after a tragedy in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. At least 8 people are now confirmed to have died in a sweltering nursing home in Hollywood, Florida. A criminal investigation is now underway. We're about to get a live update from police there in Hollywood on what they know and what they are learning. This is critical. A tragedy plays out. We'll be right back. Of the many tragedies folks have seen since Hurricane Irma, this may be the most tragic. 8 people confirmed dead in a nursing home in Hollywood, Florida, possibly linked to the air conditioning going out in the aftermath of the storm. Federal, state, and local authorities, they are now investigating. Moments ago, police and other officials offered up some new details about what they are learning so far. CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen, she's following this. She's in Hollywood. Elizabeth, what are the new details? What are we learning?
Well, what we've learned is that a search warrant has been issued for the facility behind me, for this nursing home that has had these terrible tragedies, 8 deaths. We're also told that the search warrant has not been executed. In other words, they've not actually used that search warrant to enter the facility as yet. We've also learned that 145 patients in total were evacuated out of the facility. Most of them, the vast majority of them, went to the hospital down the street, Memorial Hospital, which is not associated with this facility. And about 70 of those 145 have been transferred to skilled nursing facilities, in other words, other nursing homes. So some of these patients were okay enough to go back into a different nursing homes, but most of them have had to stay in the had to stay in the hospital. Kate?
Elizabeth, any further detail on what they think happened?
You know, there really isn't. There are so many questions right now. They said they don't know what the temperature was inside. And really what they don't know is what happened in the communication between the city, the emergency workers, and the facility. The facility was not quiet. They did call and say our air conditioning isn't working. This is according to both the facility and the emergency services. But when emergency services asked, do you need help for your residents? Are they having medical problems? The city says they were not told that the residents did have medical problems. We haven't been able to get an answer on that from the facility. But sort of what happened? There was 3 days of contact going back and forth. Why did these 8 people have to die?
Exactly the question that no family should be having to ask right now. Elizabeth, thank you so much. Elizabeth Cohen is on the ground. We're staying very close to this. Updates to come. Coming up for us. So, did President Trump strike a deal with Democrats to protect dreamers? And what are Republicans saying? What are Republicans saying about it today? We're going to be live with the top Republican senator coming up next. Are the president and congressional Democrats close to a deal to protect the hundreds of thousands of dreamers currently in the United States and currently in limbo? Maybe. What's in the deal? Anyone's guess. That empty podium you see will help us out in just a few minutes. We're going to get an update from House Speaker Paul Ryan. He's set to speak to reporters very, very soon. Hopefully some more information there. Until then, let's bring in right now Republican Senator from Louisiana, Bill Cassidy. Senator, it's great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to talk health care in a second, but first, this big news. Do you have an understanding of what the president has agreed to when it comes to DACA recipients?
I don't, because the president's tweets seem to go counter to some other decisions that have been made, the statements that have been made. But clearly he's trying to link DACA with border security and maybe a wall, maybe not a wall. You always had a sense that was the pathway he was going to. But where he actually is right now, I'm not quite sure.
Broadly speaking, do you support a DACA deal that doesn't include wall funding but does include some kind of border security element?
You know, in that you have to unpack it. We need to have a secure border, period. We need, and in some places, a border should have been built yesterday. The folks who are experts say in some places a wall may not be where you need the best way to control the border, but we need to have something more than what we have now. So I'd like to see exactly what is being offered for border security before making that decision.
Steve King this morning said that the president would be leaving his base behind if he didn't include funding for the wall. Do you think he would be?
I think there are some folks in the base who are going to be extremely upset. But I will note that a fellow who's at the Center for Immigration Studies has urged a little bit more of a wait and see. Let's actually see what the president agreed to before we react. And that's probably the wiser policy to adopt right now.
The president during the campaign, he was on the other side of this debate. Well, maybe not, because I'm not quite sure, to be honest, exactly what, just as you are, Senator. But here's what he told NBC's Chuck Todd when he was asked if he would rescind DACA. This is in the campaign. Listen.
You'll rescind the Dream Act executive order, DACA.
We have to make a whole new set of standards. And when people come in, they have to come in.
So you're going to split up families.
Chuck,
you're going to deport children.
Chuck, no. We're going to keep the families together. We have to keep the families together.
But you're going to keep them together out.
But they have to go.
What if they have no place to go?
We will work with them. They have to go. Chuck, we either have a country or we don't have a country.
They have to go. Well, that was then. So do you see this now, this negotiation is breaking a promise to voters?
The president during the campaign would sometimes shift what he said on a particular issue. And that kind of happens when candidates run for president and then achieve the presidency. I think more what he said over and over again, he wanted a wall and he wanted a secure border. And I think that is his preeminent issue. The issue of the Dreamers, again, I won't attempt to speak for the president. I'll let the president's own words speak for them himself.
And since they contradict each other, we'll wait for the next round of it to hear exactly what the president thinks. Let me ask you about health care, Senator, I'm so sorry, because you are running out of time right now to be able to come up with something that you can pass under the 50-vote rule. Have you gotten assurances from the White House that they support your plan with Senator Graham to fix health care?
Yes, we have.
Sure, assurances. So they are on board. So what are the chances that you can get this done in 17 days by the end of the month?
We need leadership. Clearly, the president can be on board, but it would be great if the president makes it even more high profile. When the president and the vice president begin calling governors and senators, that just begins to sharpen people's attention. My colleagues in the Senate, some of them obviously are a little bit fatigued with the ACA, but I'm still plugging. Others, Dean Heller, Lindsey Graham, Ron Johnson, still plugging, still fighting, still trying to make it happen. We have a process issue. We have a process issue. We need a CBO score.
A process issue, yeah.
And so we have to get that through as well. Hopefully, both the White House and our Senate leadership asking CBO to hustle a little bit may make a difference.
Have you gotten assurances directly from the president or from the vice president?
Well, the vice president, and then through Senator Graham has spoken with the president, and he assures me that the president is there, but the vice president has also assured us that the president is there.
After the end of the month, without us getting into the weeds for folks at home, you'll need 60 votes to pass anything. The Senate couldn't even get 50 on anything. Does your plan then become a pipe dream?
Yes, I do. Well, it depends. It's not a pipe dream if you think about the folks who are paying $40,000 plus for an annual premium. A fellow back home, Moon Griffon, conservative talk show host, over $40,000 a year. It will not be a pipe dream as long as we have folks unable to afford their premium. And if that is the case, it may not be done by the end of this month, but it will be done. It's just a question of timing. We're trying to set up good policy, whether it's done now or later, the good policy will still be there.
Good policy from your perspective, maybe, but just on the basic fact of you'll need to get 60 votes. I mean, from a lot of people's perspectives, has moved on from health care, Senator.